I remember the sound before I remember the date. Funny how memory works like that, how a life can pivot on something as small as a slap of paper against worn wood. But that sound, that soft, unassuming thwop on the kitchen table, that's what split my life into a before and an after. The envelope looked ordinary, harmless even, white, thin, edges slightly curled from its journey through a dozen sorting machines. But my mother froze the second she saw it, and in that brief silence, I swear, even the refrigerator stopped humming. She had flour on her hands, elbows dusted like she'd just come in from a snowstorm. She'd been rolling biscuits, something she did only when she needed to concentrate on anything but her own thoughts. I already knew what it was. Everyone in town knew what these envelopes looked like. Boys 2 grades above me had been receiving them for months. Names whispered in hallways, empty chairs at the diner, mothers at church wearing brave faces that fooled nobody. Rumors swirled faster than the autumn wind that year. If you were between 18 and 26, you lived in a permanent state of half-breath, like your life belonged to the space between mail deliveries. My father sat at the far end of the table, newspaper open but unread. He didn't look surprised. He just lowered the paper slowly, like he'd rehearsed this moment in his head for months. Maybe he had. Maybe every father had. I picked up the envelope. It felt heavier than it should have, like someone had slipped a stone inside. My name was printed in neat black letters across the front. Selective Service System. No frills, no grace. Just the plain truth wearing government ink. I didn't open it right away. I pressed it between my fingers, feeling the groove of the paper seam, feeling my heartbeat thumping against something that wasn't made to hold that kind of weight. Mom wiped her hands on her apron and took a step closer, but she didn't touch me. She just stood there behind my shoulder, her breath trembling against the back of my neck. When I finally tore the seal, it sounded louder than it should have. Sharp, like ripping fabric. I unfolded the letter slowly, carefully, as if opening it gently would change the words inside. It didn't. You are hereby ordered for induction into the armed forces of the United States. I read the line twice, maybe 3 times. The letters blurred a little around the edges. Not from tears. I didn't cry then, but from the sudden rush of blood that made the whole room feel smaller. My mother covered her mouth. My father looked at me, not with disappointment, not with fear, not even pride, but with a sort of resigned understanding, as if he'd known all along that I wouldn't escape this moment, as if none of us would. For a long time, nobody said anything. There was just the ticking clock on the wall, the faint hiss of the oven heating up, and the shaky rhythm of my mother's breathing. Eventually, she found her voice. "When?" she whispered. I swallowed hard. 2 weeks? She nodded once and turned away, wiping her eyes with the back of her wrist. My father stood up slowly, joints cracking like old wood, and walked to the sink. He braced himself against it with both hands, head bowed. I'd never seen him look small until that moment. I sat down at the table and placed the letter in front of me. It didn't look as big now, just a rectangle of paper, plain, ordinary. But everything in me knew that the life I had lived up to that moment, the boyhood I'd worn like a comfortable jacket, had just ended with a single sentence typed in Government Times New Roman. Outside, a car drove by. The neighbor's dog barked twice. The world kept going, like it hadn't just rearranged itself around me. I think that's what struck me most. The indifference of everything beyond those kitchen walls. The trees didn't bend in sorrow. The clouds didn't darken. The town didn't pause to acknowledge that a boy was being traded for a rifle half a world away. Life just continued, but mine wasn't going to. My mother came back to the table and placed a shaky hand on my shoulder. She leaned down and kissed my hair like she used to when I was 10 and scraped my knee. Except I wasn't 10 anymore, and this wasn't a scrape. "You'll come back," she whispered, though we both knew she didn't believe it fully. How could she? Half the boys we'd known who'd gone over hadn't come back at all, and the ones who did came back different. My father finally turned around. His face was composed again, controlled. He was a man who believed in holding things together even when the seams began to tear. "We'll get through these next 2 weeks," he said quietly, "one day at a time." But I heard what he didn't say. "I can't protect you from this. No one can." I folded the letter, slid it back into its envelope, and placed it on the table like a weight I wasn't ready to carry, but had no choice but to lift. At 19 years old, I had been officially claimed by a war I didn't start, didn't understand, and didn't have the courage to admit I was terrified of. The sun outside kept shining, the biscuits in the oven kept baking, and the world kept turning. But childhood, my childhood, ended right there at the kitchen table, with a letter, with a single sentence, with a truth I couldn't outrun. I didn't sleep much that night, maybe an hour, maybe less. My room felt different, smaller somehow, like the walls understood something I didn't yet. The letter sat on my dresser where I'd left it, the envelope propped up at an awkward angle as if even it was unsure where it belonged. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the words again. "Ordered for induction," a phrase that sounded more like a sentence than a summons. By morning, the news had already begun to spread. I learned quickly that in small towns, secrets are like smoke. They slip through cracks, drift under doors, and by the time you notice the smell, everyone's already coughing. My mother tried to keep things quiet, but before lunch, we'd already had 2 phone calls, just checking in. No one actually said the word drafted. They didn't have to. The kitchen table became the place where every conversation seemed to happen. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, it all centered around that worn wooden surface, as if the letter had magnetized the house. My mother kept wiping the table even when it wasn't dirty, long, slow strokes like she could polish away the tension collecting there. That afternoon, she finally sat across from me, her hands folded tightly together, knuckles white. "We need to talk about everything," she said gently. If I'm being honest, I didn't want to talk. I wanted to pretend the letter was a bad dream, something I'd wake up from with my heart pounding and the dawn light reminding me I was still safe. But I wasn't a kid anymore, at least not in the eyes of the government. "What do you want to know?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "How you feel," she said. "Really feel." That was the hardest question, not because I didn't know, but because saying it out loud would make it real. "I'm scared," I admitted, my voice low. "Really scared." Her eyes softened, though they glistened with worry. "I know, baby." "I don't want to go," I continued, feeling the truth spill out like someone had cracked open a dam. "I'm not ready. I don't understand any of this. One letter, and suddenly my whole life is different." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Her hands were warm, always warm, and in that moment, I felt like a little boy again, sitting on that same table, telling her about scraped knees or broken toys. "You don't have to be ready," she whispered. "You just have to be brave." Brave. People used that word a lot back then. Brave was a bandage people wrapped around fear to make it hurt less. Boys weren't brave, we were drafted. Dad came in from the yard a few minutes later, dust on his boots, the lines on his face deeper than the day before. He stood by the doorway for a long moment, listening. When he finally sat down, He didn't say anything at first, just stared at his hands. "I was hoping it wouldn't be your name," he said quietly. I looked up, surprised. He'd always been the strong one, the steady one. Hearing him say that felt like a crack running straight through the center of the house. "What do you mean?" I asked. "I watch the news every night," he said. "Saw the lists, heard the numbers. Some boys got lucky, some didn't, and every time I prayed it wouldn't be you." My mother reached for his arm, squeezing gently, but he wasn't finished. "I fought in Korea," he said. "I know what war does, what it takes. I didn't want that for you." There it was, the thing he'd never said, not once, not even when I was younger and curious about his medals or the pictures he kept in his drawer. He'd always been vague about his time overseas, always kept the details locked away. And now I understood why. My mother sniffed and wiped her eyes quickly. It wasn't that she didn't want us to see her cry. She just didn't want her crying to make it harder. "We'll get through it," she said firmly. "As a family." Dad nodded, though his eyes stayed on the table. "Your Uncle Ray wants to come by later," he said. "What for?" I asked, though I had a sinking feeling I already knew. "To talk to you," he said. "He's got opinions about everything." I exhaled heavily. Uncle Ray was the type of man who treated every problem with a mixture of whiskey, loud words, and stories that never seemed to end. Sure enough, he showed up 2 hours later, smelling faintly of cigarettes and gasoline. He slapped me on the back as he sat down. "Heard you got the letter," he said. "Tough break." "Yeah," I said. "But listen here," he continued, leaning forward. "Every man's got moments in his life where he's tested. This is yours. You get through this, you come back stronger." My dad shot him a look that said, "Not now." But Uncle Ray didn't notice. "It's not about coming back stronger," my mother snapped, surprising everyone. "It's about coming back alive." The room fell silent. Uncle Ray leaned back slowly, rubbing the back of his neck. "Fair enough," he muttered. From there, the conversations kept coming. Friends stopped by. Neighbors left pies on the porch. As if sugar could sweeten the heaviness in the air, Mr. Walters from down the street told me he was proud. Mrs. Delaney cried when she saw me, muttering, "Not another one," under her breath. Kids in school looked at me differently, like I had one foot already gone. Every interaction felt like a confession, people telling me their fears, their hopes, their memories of other boys who went and didn't come back. I sat through it all, nodding politely, thanking them, feeling like I was drifting through my own life instead of living it. But the hardest conversation was the one that happened after everyone else went to bed. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the letter again, tracing the edges of the words with my fingertip. My father walked in quietly and sat across from me. No pleasantries, no small talk. "You don't have to pretend you're okay," he said. I didn't answer. He continued. "I was scared too," he said. "Terrified. Anyone who says they weren't is lying." I looked at him, this man who had always seemed unshakable, and for the first time, I saw the truth behind his calm. "I don't know how to do this," I whispered. "You don't?" he said. "You learn it as you go, one step at a time, one day at a time. The fear never leaves you. You just learn to move with it." We sat in silence for a long while, two grown men, one who had already survived a war and one who was about to face his own. Eventually, he pushed his chair back and stood. "Try to sleep," he said. "Tomorrow, we start preparing." As he walked away, I looked down at the letter one more time, and I realized the truth I had been avoiding. This wasn't just a piece of paper, it was a dividing line. The boy I had been sat on one side, the man I would become sat on the other, and I was already being pulled across. The days that followed felt like they were being rationed out to me. Small portions of time carefully measured, like someone somewhere decided I didn't deserve full days anymore. Not when each one brought me closer to leaving. Not when each sunset was a countdown. My mother tried to keep the house normal, but nothing was normal. Not the way she folded my shirts with a little too much care, smoothing the sleeves like she was memorizing the feel of the fabric. Not the way she hovered in the doorway when I ate breakfast, watching me like she was afraid I might disappear between bites. Even the way she said my name sounded different, softer, slower, as if she were whispering it into a diary. Dad dealt with it by staying busy, fixing things that didn't need fixing, oiling hinges that weren't squeaking, tightening screws just to loosen them again. He'd wander into the garage, come back out 10 minutes later, then wander right back in. He wasn't looking for tools. He was looking for anything that didn't remind him of time slipping through his fingers. My friends didn't know what to say. Some avoided me completely, afraid their jokes or normal conversations might feel like disrespect. Others tried too hard, slapping my back, calling me soldier in exaggerated voices, pretending this was just some grand adventure I'd chosen. But when the laughter faded, the truth always settled back into the silence around us. We were all pretending. The first real goodbye came from my grandmother. She lived 2 neighborhoods over in a small house with peeling paint and a porch swing that had been squeaking since the Eisenhower administration. She insisted I come see her alone. When I walked in, she was already sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and my favorite lemon cookies. "You look tired," she said, reaching out to touch my cheek like she had when I was 10. "I am," I admitted. She nodded as if she already knew. "Sit down, honey." I sat across from her. She studied me for a long moment, her eyes soft but steady. "Your grandfather went to war too," she said. "Different war, same fear." I swallowed. "Was he scared?" "Scared out of his soul," she said plainly. "But he went, and he came back. Not exactly the same, but alive. And you will too." There it was again. Those words people kept offering like blessings. You'll come back. But no one could promise that. Not in 1968. Not with the way the casualty numbers rolled across the evening news like stock market figures, up, down, always climbing. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a small silver cross on a chain. "This was his," she said, placing it gently in my palm. "It kept him safe. Maybe it'll keep you safe too." I stared at the cross, my throat tightening. "I can't take this." "You already have," she said, "and I won't argue." I leaned down and hugged her. She held on longer than she ever had. When I stepped out into the sunlight, the world felt too bright, too loud, too normal for the weight I carried in my pocket. The next goodbye came from someone I didn't expect, Mary Collins. Mary lived 2 streets over, a girl I'd known my whole life but never really knew. She was smart, quiet, always carrying books like they were oxygen tanks. We'd gone to school together since kindergarten, shared classrooms, hallways, occasional projects, but we'd never been close. She showed up on my porch that Thursday afternoon, clutching a paper bag. "I heard," she said softly. I nodded. "Seems everyone has." "I made you something." She held out the bag. Inside was a small journal, hand-stitched, the cover made of worn leather. "In case you want to write things down," she said. "My brother did when he went. Said it helped." I looked up at her. "Where's he now?" Her eyes flickered. "He didn't make it back." The air thickened between us. I swallowed a lump I couldn't name. "I'm sorry." She nodded once, then handed me a pen. "Just write it all down. Whatever happens, Words are the only thing war can't burn. Before she left, she touched my arm gently. "Come home," she whispered. "Please." Her voice cracked on the last word. I watched her walk down the driveway, hair blowing slightly in the warm breeze, and for the first time in my life, I realized how fragile people really were, how we all carried invisible fractures. As the week ticked down, the town felt different, or maybe I did. Packing became an emotional battlefield. Every shirt folded felt like a countdown. Every object placed in my duffel felt like choosing what parts of myself to bring into a world I wasn't ready for. Mom tried to help at first, but she kept pausing over little things: an old baseball cap, a photograph from summer camp, the sweater she knitted me last year. "You won't need all this," Dad said gently. "Take only what matters." What mattered? I still don't have an answer, but I packed the cross from Grandma, the journal from Mary, a picture of my family taken last Christmas, and a smooth pebble I'd found by the river when I was 12. Strange, the things you cling to when the ground beneath you is shifting. On the final night, before I was due to leave for basic training, Dad knocked on my door. "Come on," he said. "Let's take a drive." We didn't talk much at first. He drove the old pickup down the back roads that cut through fields of tall grass. The sun had already dipped below the horizon, leaving streaks of orange and pink across the sky, like the day was bleeding out slowly. About 10 miles out, he pulled over near the same river where he used to take me fishing when I was a kid. The water was dark, moving quietly under the moonlight. We sat on the hood of the truck, listening to the breeze pushing through the reeds. "I wanted to tell you something," he finally said, "and I didn't want your mother to hear it." I looked at him, heart thumping. "There will be days," he said slowly, "when you'll want to give up. When you'll feel alone, scared, and angry. When all you'll want is to come home." I swallowed hard. "But you won't," he continued, "because you're stronger than you know. You're not going there alone. You're carrying all of us with you." After a long pause, he added, "And when you're afraid, and you will be, remember this: fear means you're still alive. It means you still have something worth protecting." I felt my throat tighten. "Dad," I whispered, "what if I can't do it?" He turned to me, eyes shining in the low light. "You can, and you will, one breath at a time." We sat together, a father and son at the edge of childhood, listening to the river whisper secrets neither of us could understand. When we pulled back into the driveway, Mom was waiting on the porch. She hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe, and I didn't want her to let go. That night, I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house creak and settle around me like it was memorizing my presence. I could feel the weight of tomorrow pressing against my chest. My last night home wasn't marked by fireworks or revelations. It was marked by small things: the sound of my mother's footsteps in the hallway, the soft rumble of Dad's voice downstairs, the rustle of leaves outside my window. Ordinary moments suddenly felt sacred because I knew I'd soon be living a life where nothing ordinary existed. Tomorrow, I would step into a world designed to break me down. Tonight, I was still home, still a boy, still pretending the morning sun wouldn't change everything. Morning came too fast. Not the gentle kind of morning with birds and warm yellow light creeping through the curtains. This one arrived sharp, cold, and merciless, like it had a schedule to keep. I woke before the alarm, before my parents, before the sun itself. My bag sat by the door, packed and ready, like it belonged to someone braver than me. Mom made breakfast, even though none of us were hungry. Eggs, toast, bacon. the kind of breakfast she made on holidays. Except now the plate sat mostly untouched, the food going cold while we traded glances instead of words. When it was finally time to leave, Dad helped load my duffel into the trunk. His hands lingered on the bag a second longer than necessary. "You got everything?" he asked, though we both knew he wasn't talking about items. "I think so," I said quietly. Mom's hug felt like it could fold the whole world in half. She whispered, "Write me every week," as if doing so could anchor me to home. I promised I would, even though I didn't know what the days ahead would look like. The ride to the induction center was quiet. Dad drove, jaw tight, eyes focused on the road like it might fall apart if he blinked too long. Mom held my hand in the back seat, her thumb tracing small circles on my skin. When we pulled into the lot, dozens of boys stood around with the same nervous stiffness I felt. Some clung to girlfriends. Some tried to make jokes. Some stared at the pavement like they were memorizing it. I hugged my parents one last time. Dad held my shoulders and said, "Be smart, not brave. Brave boys get reckless. Smart boys come home." His voice cracked on that last word. Home. Then the whistle blew and everything sped up. Basic training didn't ease you in gently. It felt like stepping into a storm with no roof, no walls, nothing to shield you. The moment the bus doors opened at the base, the drill instructors descended like a pack of wolves, smelling fresh fear. "Move! Move! Move!" Their voices weren't just loud, they were designed to shatter whatever innocence still clung to us. The ground shook with 100 boots slamming down in chaotic unison. The air smelled like sweat, metal, and dust. Within the first hour, they shaved our heads. All of us, no exceptions. Boys with long hair, short hair, curls, fades, gone. The floor was covered in piles of it, like we were shedding pieces of who we used to be. "You ain't at home anymore," one instructor shouted. "You ain't boys. You belong to Uncle Sam now." I ran a hand over my newly bare scalp. It felt like touching someone else's skin. We were issued uniforms, stiff as cardboard, boots that felt like they were made of iron, and a schedule that didn't care if you were tired, overwhelmed, or questioning every decision that brought you there. The first day ended with us standing in formation for what felt like hours. Sweat streaming down our backs, the sun turning the world into a blinding smear of heat and dust. And that was only day one. Sleep came in tiny fragments that first week. We were up at dawn, running drills before the sky even had the decency to turn blue. Push-ups until our arms trembled, ruck marches that made our shoulders ache, rifle lessons that left our fingers raw, instructors barking orders so fast our brains couldn't keep up. Everything had a purpose. Everything was meant to break us. And it worked. I felt myself cracking, not loudly, not visibly, but quietly. Hairline fractures spreading through the parts of me that once believed the world was predictable. But something else happened too. We started forming bonds. Not friendships at first, just a shared exhaustion, a shared confusion, a shared sinking feeling that if we didn't lean on each other, we'd collapse. There was Danny from Ohio who cracked jokes even when he couldn't breathe. There was Harper from Georgia, quiet and built like a tree trunk, who helped anyone who fell behind. There was Stein from Brooklyn, who missed pizza more than his own bed. And there was Cruz from New Mexico, who carried a photo of his newborn daughter tucked inside his shirt every single day. We weren't brothers yet, but we were becoming something close. One night, after a brutal day of obstacle courses, an instructor stood in front of our platoon and shouted, "Look left, look right. These boys are all you got now. You got problems, they fix them. You got fear, they carry it with you. You aren't individuals anymore. You are a unit." I looked left, I looked right. And for the first time, I felt it. We weren't alone. We were scared, exhausted, confused, but not alone. Letters from home became lifelines. My mother wrote every week, sometimes twice. Pages filled with updates about neighbors, weather, recipes she was trying, things that didn't matter, but somehow meant everything. My father wrote less often, but when he did, the letters were steady, grounding, practical advice, encouragement, a quiet strength woven between the lines. Mary wrote once too. Her letter was short, just a single page. "I hope you're writing things down," she said. "Words survive what people don't." I wasn't sure if she meant it as comfort or warning. Some boys broke early. One kid from Kansas, only 18, cracked after 5 days. Couldn't handle the shouting, the pressure, the constant scrutiny. They sent him home with a medical discharge. I watched him leave, shoulders slumped, eyes wide, and for a moment, envy flickered in me. Not because he quit, but because he didn't have to finish the road the rest of us were trapped on. But then one of the instructors pulled us aside and said, "Every one of you wants to quit. Don't lie to yourselves. But quitting doesn't make the world safer. It just leaves your brothers with one fewer set of hands." The message was clear. We weren't training for ourselves. We were training for the men beside us. By the end of the 3rd week, I started to understand what Dad meant when he said fear was a sign you were still alive. I carried fear everywhere, like a rucksack strapped to my spine. But I also carried something else, a sense that the boy I'd been at home was slowly being sanded away. I wasn't stronger or braver or any of the words people use to make sense of war. I was just becoming different, more aware, more guarded, more hardened around the edges. The instructors didn't just teach us how to shoot, march, survive. They taught us how to let go of the things that would break us out there. They taught us how to stop thinking like boys and start thinking like soldiers. There was a night near the end of training when we sat around the bunks, lights out, whispering in the dark. The room smelled like sweat and dust, but the air felt lighter somehow. "You scared?" Danny asked. "Yeah," I said. "Me too," he whispered. "Everyone is." Silence settled again, a heavy blanket that none of us protested. It was the kind of honesty only darkness allows. On the final day before shipping out, we gathered for one last formation. The instructors stood in front of us, not yelling, not correcting, but simply looking, studying the faces they'd spent weeks reshaping. One instructor stepped forward. "Tomorrow," he said, voice steady, "you go from training to reality." He paused. "And reality doesn't care how good you were in drills. Out there, you'll have seconds to remember everything we taught you, seconds to survive. But remember this, don't fight alone, don't think alone, don't fall alone." He looked at us with something dangerously close to pride. "You made it through this part. That means you can make it through what's next." We didn't cheer, didn't clap. We just stood there, hearts pounding, knowing that sunrise would take us away from everything familiar. As I returned to my bunk, I pulled out my journal, the one Mary made, and stared at the blank first page. Then, with hands that felt older than my 19 years, I finally wrote the first words. "Tomorrow, I leave for Vietnam."